All right. All right. So, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. It's about 8:47 p.m. where I'm at right now. September 26, 2024. Literally just came home from work, not even home less than like 30 minutes before I'm hopping on stream. And I got more English classes to teach at about 10 o'clock. So I only have about an hour and 20 minutes or so until I got to hop off stream. But I wanted to come on live and continue reading this book that we're trying to finish for our book react series. This is book 5, Kamala Harris's The Truths We Told, her 2019 memoir. So we're going to continue knocking this down, chipping away at it every single day until we get our 5th book done this year that we've read on live. Go check out the other 4 books that we've covered and all the discussions and rants that I went on regarding those books. And I also wanted to come on stream today and say thank you, looking you directly in the eyes personally. Thank you so much to my first ever channel member, Z-Man. Z-Man is somebody who has been lurking in the shadows. I think maybe I responded to maybe one of his comments like one time or something like that, but I've never seen Z-Man regularly in the comments or anything like that. But he was the first person to sign up as a member for my channel. You get what I'm saying? And I appreciate him for that. I want to start doing some members only content. I want to start uploading more. I've been hella busy with school, work, and making sure my girl come. You feel me? So I got a lot on my plate. It's hard being a young black man who's married, working 3, 4. I got 4 or 5 jobs. I got at least 6 jobs. All right. Something like that. Right. And I'm trying to do live streams and YouTube on the side. It's a grind that I'm always on. But I want to say thank you to Z-Man and thank you to everybody else out there who sent super chats and all sorts of donations my way. I appreciate that. I hope what I'm doing is valuable. I hope my voice is valuable. I hope y'all feel my words, feel my heart, feel my spirit, feel my soul as I'm coming through the speaker to your ear. You feel me? And yeah, what y'all think about these new headsets? What y'all think about the new headset? How does it sound? How does it look? Do I look like a goofy? Do I look like a goofy incel streamer? I know my head is big, and then on top of that, I got this big headset piece on me. It might look crazy. You feel me? I don't know. Y'all let me know. How do I look? How does your boy look with the headset on? And does it actually sound right? You feel me? Anyway, let me know in the chat if you can hear me well, if the sound is good, everything like that. And yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into it. Today, we're continuing in Kamala's book. I believe we're in chapter 2, the second half of chapter 2. And in the last part that we read, basically, it talked about Kamala's early career as a prosecutor for the state, why she wanted to be a prosecutor for the state. I went on a little rant about my opinion about that, and I was thinking about that more today. Generally, no, we cannot reform the system from being on the inside. Like, we should be participating in the system, but trying to participate for its overall overhaul, for the overall overhaul of the system, but thinking that we can become prosecutors, police, judges, that sort of stuff, presidents, and thinking that we can bring about the type of radical reform and change that needs to be had in America. No, we should be constantly challenging the system, confronting it head on, not trying to do some type of subversive, sneaky tactics to be inside the matrix, because the matrix can conform us. The matrix can twist us. We cannot twist the entire system. The only way, Neo didn't say, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to become Mr. Smith so I can bring down the matrix. What Neo did, and all the other people in Zion, what they did is they unplugged from the matrix and went into direct conflict with it and fought with it. There's no way we can jump into the system and actually think that we can purposefully change it bit by bit, kink by kink, gear by gear, cranny by cranny, and be able to have something new and reform. That's not the way it's going to work. We must remain revolutionary, stalwart revolutionaries. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, I was talking about that in the live stream we did reading Kamala's book. And the last part where we ended on the book, basically she had run for I believe the prosecutor for California, right? The state's attorneys, right? And she won. She won the race, becoming the first Black woman to do so, which was an amazing thing, right? And an issue that I had with this book is that they didn't talk about Willie Brown at all, right? So Kamala was in a very public relationship with the first Black mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown, and his name is not mentioned at all, right? And I think if Kamala was going to be real with herself in telling her career story, She doesn't have to go about talk about every single dude she slept with or had a relationship with, but I do think it would have been important and necessary to talk about a man who was instrumental in her life. Now she might disagree, and who knows better than her, right? Than who was instrumental in her life. But I feel like in a memoir, if I was to write a memoir about my life and my story, I would be insane not to include my first wife in my story, right? Regardless of whether we're talking or not, right? I think it's crazy to say, you were with the first black man in San Francisco, and that's was around the same time that you got all these jobs and you were climbing up in your career as a lawyer. Not saying that you slept your way to the top. It just seems a bit crazy not to include him even as a shout out. And I thought y'all were on good terms anyway. That's just my thoughts on that. Anyway, I'm going to continue reading here, and let me know what y'all think in the comments. Let's go. I just had I had just sat down at my desk when my administrative assistant came in. Boss, there's another mom out here. Thanks. I'll be right out. I walked down the hallway to the lobby to greet her. I'd been on the job only a few weeks, but it was not the first time I'd taken this walk. This was not the first time a woman had shown up and said, I want to speak to Kamala. I only want to speak to Kamala. I knew exactly why she was there. She was the mother of a murdered child. The woman nearly collapsed in my arms. Her devastation was visceral. She was grieving and exhausted, and yet her being there at all was a testament to her strength. She was there for her baby, the baby she'd lost, a young man killed by gunfire in the streets. It had been months since her son's death, and yet the killer still walked free. The case was one of the more than 70 unsolved homicides languishing in the San Francisco Police Department when I took office. I had known some of these mothers, and others I had met while I was campaigning. They were almost all Black or Latina from high crime neighborhoods, and all of them loved their children deeply. They had come together to form a group, Mothers of Homicide Victims. It was part support group, part advocacy organization. They leaned on one another to work through their grief, and they organized to get justice for their sons. They weren't sure if I could help them, but they knew that I would at least see them. And I mean literally see them, see their pain, see their anguish, see their souls, which were bleeding. First and foremost, they knew I would see them as loving, grieving mothers. This is part of the tragedy. When people hear that a mother has lost a child to cancer or a car accident or war, the natural response is collective sympathy and concern. But when a woman loses her son to violence in the streets, the response from the public is often different, almost a collective shrug, as though unexpected eventuality, not the horrific tragedy of losing a child, but rather just another statistic, as though the circumstances of her son's death define the value of his life, as though the loss she has suffered is less valid, less painful, less worthy of compassion. I walked her back to my office so we could have some privacy to talk. She told me her son had been shot and killed, that no one had been arrested, and that no one seemed to care. She described the day she had to go to the coroner's office to identify his body, how she couldn't get that image out of her head of him lifeless in a place so cold. She had left messages for the homicide inspector, she said, suggesting possible leads, but she never heard back. Nothing had happened. Nothing seemed to be happening, and she couldn't understand why. She grasped my hand and looked me straight in my eye. He mattered, she said. He still matters to me. He matters to me too. I reassured her. His life should have mattered to everyone. I told my team to get the entire squad of homicide inspectors to convene in my conference room as soon as possible. I wanted to know what was going on with all these cases. The homicide inspectors showed up not knowing what to expect. At the time, I didn't know it was uncommon for the district attorney to summon them for a meeting. One by one, I asked them to tell me the status of the unresolved homicide cases and pressed them for details about what they were going to do to help us get the justice for these families. I had very pointed questions, and I pushed the inspectors harder, I later learned, than they were expecting. This ruffled some feathers, but it was the right thing to do, and it needed to be done, regardless of whether it had been done before. They took my call to action seriously. Within a month of the meeting, the police department launched a new campaign to try to encourage witnesses to step forward. And in time, we were able to reduce the backlog of unsolved homicides by 25%. Not every case could be solved, but we made sure we worked hard to ensure that everyone that could be was. Some people were surprised I was so relentless, and I knew some others questioned how I, as a black woman, could countenance being part of the machine, putting more young men of color behind bars. There is no doubt that the criminal justice system has deep flaws, that it is broken in fundamental ways, and we need to deal with that. But we cannot overlook or ignore that mother's pain, that child's death, that murderer who still walks the streets. I believe there must be serious consequences for people who commit serious crimes. I've handled cases for just about every crime imaginable, including a man who had literally scalped his girlfriend during an argument. I've prosecuted sadistic criminals who have committed the most heinous, unspeakable acts against other people. I've been at homicide scenes where people had been killed, and I've won guilty verdicts against those who did the killing. I faced cold blooded murderers in the courtroom as a judge, laid down a sentence of life in prison, and I haven't shied away from calling the harsher sentences in certain cases. In 2004, for example, I got a bill passed in California to lengthen the sentences for so called Johns who paid to have sex with underage girls. I believed that should be treated as child sexual assault. But let's be clear, the situation is not the same, nor should it be when it comes to less serious crimes. I remember the first time I visited the county jail. So many young men, and they were mostly black or brown or poor. Too many were there because of addiction and desperation and poverty. They were fathers who missed their kids. They were young adults, many of whom had been pulled into gangs with no real choice in the matter. The majority weren't there for violent offenses, and yet they have become drops in the sea for those swept up in the wave of mass incarceration. People whose lives had been destroyed along with their families and their communities. They represented a living monument to lost potential, and I wanted to tear it down. Okay, I just got to say this in regards to the uh, just the sheer number of murders, right? Because like in any other country, the level of homicide in one major US city per year is enough to cause a national uproar, right? But in America, it's normal to hear, yeah, San Francisco had about 79 homicides that year. Sounds about right. Sounds about right. In other countries, that number is like what you would hear in like Istanbul. Istanbul, a city of 20 million people, right? You get 79 homicides. But in San Francisco, a city of barely what, a million point five in the metro area, yeah, you get 79 homicides. And it's up even more across the whole nation and stuff like that. I just find it very sad that Kamala Harris fell into the white supremacist death cult in America, which worships the gun, which worships their God, the long black metal phallus of the pistol. Kamala Harris did an interview recently, I believe, with ABC or one of those major networks, and said that she's a gun owner and she supports the Second Amendment when she knows. I know she knows in her heart, or at least I'll let her know, and every other American should know, we would not be seeing the level of homicides in America if the gun was not so readily available. I'm in Hungary right now. Trust me, they got crazy people out here. I see them on the metro. I see them on the subway. I see them in the streets. I live in District 9, baby. Nothing but drunks and assholes walking around here. But they ain't shooting up schools. They ain't shooting up each other. A lot of poor people here in Hungary as well. Poverty is not the reason why we have that many homicides in America. The reason why we have the mass number of homicides in America is the gun. And until you're talking about getting rid of the gun, you are in a cult. White supremacist America got most Americans in a cult worshiping the gun, where they will fight and die over protecting the right to kill each other rather than protecting children and each other's lives. Continuing here. In 1977, in the heart of the San Francisco neighborhood known as Western Addition, my friend Latifah Simon was born. She grew up in what was once a middle-class neighborhood as a crack epidemic was starting to take hold. She saw firsthand She saw firsthand what it was doing to her community, the self-destructive addiction it fueled, the burden it placed on families that were already struggling to get by with little semblance of a safety net, the way it disappeared fathers and corroded even a mother's most deep-seated instinct to care for her child. When Latifah was a young girl, her desire Her desire was to help people, but as she got older, she became one of the many who needed help. She ended up on probation for shoplifting. She dropped out of high school, but then someone intervened. Latifah was a teenager working 8 hours a day at Taco Bell when an outreach worker told her about an opportunity. There was an organization in San Francisco, the Center for Young Women's Development, that provided social services, including job training to girls and young women who were on the streets or in trouble. The center was recruiting for new staff to work there. Latifah saw a lifeline and grabbed hold. She started working for the center when she was a teenager and raising a daughter of her own. Soon, she was unstoppable. She was everywhere at local government meetings, calling for changes to help girls who'd been trafficked on the streets of poor neighborhoods, handing out condoms and candy bars. Along with information about how to get help. And at the center itself, working with vulnerable girls from her neighborhood. I saw resilience in these young women, she recalled. There were people who had absolutely nothing, but were somehow able to make it through the day and the next day and the next. The center's board members were so impressed by Latifah's tenacity, skills, and leadership that they asked her to become executive director when she was just 19 years old. She said yes, and that was when I came to know her. At the city's attorney's office, I had been working with the same community of women that Latifah had. I had been holding Know Your Rights sessions for vulnerable women all across the city, and I asked Latifah to join our efforts. I could see that Latifah was a genius, and it turned out I wasn't the only one who thought so. In 2003, she became the youngest woman ever to win prestigious MacArthur Genius Award with only a GED. When I became district attorney, I often thought to myself, what if Latifah had been picked up for a bag of weed instead of shoplifting? What if she'd been sentenced to prison instead of probation? I knew what a felony conviction meant. It wasn't just about the time in prison, it was about what happens afterwards. As a country, we specialize in releasing inmates into desperate, hopeless situations. We give them a little bit of money and a bus ticket, and we send them on their way with the felony conviction on their record. Not the kind of experience most employers are looking for. In so many cases, finding themselves rejected in the hiring process, they have no way of making money. From the moment they leave, they are in danger of returning. They end up in the same neighborhood with the same people on the same corner. The only difference is that they've now served time. Prison has its own gravitational pull, often inescapable. Of the hundreds of thousands of prisoners we release as a country every year, nearly 70% commit a crime within 3 years. The status quo isn't working. I brought a small group of trusted advisors together, including my bold and brilliant chief of policy, Tim Seilert, and posed a question. What would it take to put together a reentry program that actually worked? Put another way, if the best way of providing public safety is preventing crime in the first place, what can we do to prevent people from reoffending? What if we could really get them back on track? That question would become the name of the program Tim and I developed together, Back on Track. At the heart of the program was my belief in the power of redemption. Redemption is an age-old concept rooted in many religions. It is a concept that presupposes that we all make mistakes, and for some, that mistake will rise to the level of being a crime. Yes, there must be consequences and accountability, but after that debt to society has been paid, is it not the sign of a civil society that we allow people to earn their way back? There was tremendous pushback at first. At the time, criminal justice policy was still trending towards things like harsher sentences or militarizing the police. The guiding belief among many was that the criminal justice system wasn't punitive enough. More than a decade later, that attitude has, thankfully, evolved, opening up space for a more balanced approach. Reentry programs like Back on Track are now part of the mainstream conversation. But in those days, I faced intensive backlash, including from people I worked with on the regular basis. They saw a prosecutor's job as putting people in prison, not focusing on what happens to them when they get out. That was someone else's problem. I was accused of wasting precious time and resources. People would say to me, you should be locking them up instead of letting them out. But we persevered. It was one of the things I valued about running the office. In the end, it was up to me whether we were going to pursue the initiative. I would hear out my critics, but I wouldn't be constrained by them. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to prove it could be done. So Tim and I got to work. We wanted to create opportunities by running participants through a rigorous program that I often compared to boot camp. It would include job training, GED courses, community service, parenting and financial literacy classes, as well as drug testing and therapy. The DA's office led the charge, but we recruited a range of critical partners from Goodwill Industries, which oversaw community service and employment training, to the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce and its member companies, which helped find jobs for program participants, to local trade unions, which provided valuable apprenticeship opportunities. Though compassionate in its approach, Back on Track was intense by design. That was not a so This was not a social welfare program. It was a law enforcement program. Ugh, so gross. I just have to stop right here. It's so bothersome how welfare in America became a dirty word. Like we can't, like what would be wrong if Back on Track was a social welfare program where after serving time in a penal institution, a person comes out and they are given free housing. They are given some basic income to live off of. They are given free healthcare and that sort of stuff. What is wrong with that? Why is everything in our sick, capitalist, twisted system based upon penalties, punishment, enforcement, and work? It's a law enforcement program. What is this? What is this? A job training, right? What about actually getting people some mental health treatment after going through horrific things in prison? You get what I'm saying? Now, I'm not saying that somebody who committed heinous crimes against innocent civilians, especially if they're violent crimes, like they should just be treated like princesses in jail. But we lose total humanity when it comes to regarding people when they go into the prison system. And we lost, and to be honest, we've lost humanity when we talk about each other in relations to each other in this capitalist system. What do you do for work? How much do you make? Et cetera, et cetera. The value of a person is calculated by their bank account, so forth and so forth. It's kind of sick and twisted. And it really bothers me so much that social welfare is considered a dirty word, because that's how Kamala framed it. You get what I'm saying? And it's like, we really need to push the Overton window in America where we make welfare seem actually okay. There's nothing wrong with getting welfare. There's nothing wrong with having entitlements. There's nothing wrong with getting something for free. There's nothing wrong with getting something for free. If you're in the richest nation in the world, capable of ending child hunger multiple times over, capable of housing everybody multiple times over, capable of educating everybody multiple times over, capable of treating everybody with their health problems multiple times over, there is nothing wrong with them doing that. They are the morally wrong ones for not doing it. You get what I'm saying? We are not the morally wrong ones for asking. All right, demanding, because it's our labor. It's our labor that makes the backbone of this nation. Continuing here, I'm sorry, I got so triggered right there. Anyway, all of the first participants were nonviolent first-time offenders who had started their journey on the Hall of Justice in the back of a squad car. Participants had to first plead guilty and accept responsibility for the actions that had brought them there. We promised that if participants completed the program successfully, we would have their charges expunged, which gave them even more reason to put in the effort. We hadn't designed a program that was about incremental improvement around the edges. It was about transformation. We knew what these young people were capable of achieving, and we wanted them to see it in themselves. We wanted every participant to reach for the highest bar. When it came time to identify someone to run the program, one name immediately came to mind. I called Latifah. At first, she was reluctant. She had never imagined herself as the kind of person who would work for the DA. I never wanted to work for the man, she told me. Don't worry, I laughed. You won't be working for the man, you'll be working for me. Latifah worked incredibly hard, and so did the Back on Track students. And on a night I'll never forget, we got to share in the fruits of that effort together. Tim, Latifah, and many others from my office joined me after the court had closed for the evening. We headed down the hall toward the jury assembly room. When we entered, the room was filled with people carrying flowers and balloons. The bustling, joyous mood was not typical in a jury room, to say the least, but this was not a typical night. I walked to the front of the room and opened the ceremonies for the first Back on Track graduation ceremony. Through the main door, a group of 18 men and women walked down the aisle to take their seats. With few exceptions, this was the first time in their lives that they had ever worn graduation robes. Only a handful of them had ever had an occasion to which they could invite their family, an occasion that would make their loved ones cry happy tears. This celebration was hard won, and they deserved every minute of it. In the years since they started the program, each of them had, at a minimum, earned a GED and landed a steady job. They had all done community service, more than 200 hours of it. The fathers among them had all paid out their outstanding child support payments, and they were all drug-free. They proved they could do it and that it could be done. In exchange for that effort and that success, we were there to keep our promise. In addition to a diploma, the graduates would have their records cleared by a judge who was standing by. A number of Superior Court judges volunteered to preside over back on track graduations, including my friend John Dearman, a former social worker who became the longest serving judge in San Francisco's history. Another among them was Judge Thelton Henderson, an icon in the civil rights movement, who in 1963 lent his car to Martin Luther King Jr. so Dr. King could make his way to Selma after his own car broke down. Back on Track quickly proved its merits. After 2 years, only 10% of Back on Track graduates had reoffended, as compared with 50% of others convicted of similar crimes. It represented smart, effective stewardship of taxpayer dollars, too. Our program costs about $5,000 per participant. For comparison, it costs $10,000 to prosecute a felony case and another $40,000 or more to house someone for a year in the county jail. Local officials don't have the ability to make national policy. They have no authority beyond their jurisdiction. But when they land on good ideas, even on a small scale, they can create examples that others can replicate. That was a key goal of ours in creating Back on Track. We wanted to show leaders at every level of government and every state in the union that a re-entry initiative could work and was worth trying. So we were especially gratified when the Obama Justice Department adopted Back on Track as a model program. When I later ran for Attorney General, I did so in no small part to take the program statewide. Okay, sorry. I started off this live stream saying that she was already the Attorney General for California. Technically, she was the Attorney General for San